It finally happened. Russia and the US decided everything for Ukraine. Volodymyr Zelensky breaks the silence and goes all in. On the front line, our forces hit the jackpot. The first footage from the hottest spots. The thief let his guard down and got what he deserved. At this very moment, Putin is seriously upset. Russia's shadow fleet is going under, dragging the Kremlin down with it. A breakthrough in Ukrainian technology, the Ukraine-UK alliance has made the skies impenetrable. Turkey is tying the dictator's hands while Europe is preparing to strike even lower. The belt? All this and more in our episode, Hell Point. An urgent total knockout for diplomacy. Something has surfaced about the negotiations that they tried to keep hidden. Now everything is behind closed doors with all documents marked as secret. Tensions are rising, Zelensky is taking urgent action, and Orban is heading to the Kremlin. Did the Hungarian Prime Minister bring an unexpected gift for Trump straight from Budapest? An unexpected turn of events. Washington is getting nervous. What is truly happening behind the intricate scenes in global geopolitics? More on this in the following report.
Scandals won't get in the way of the negotiations. Kyiv is preparing for the next rounds.
Next week, there will be important negotiations not only for our delegation, but also for me personally. And we are laying a solid foundation for these negotiations. Ukraine will stand on its own feet, firmly, and always will.
The preparations for further negotiations were marked by yet another extraordinary event. The anti-corruption authorities conducted searches at the home of the head of the Ukrainian negotiation team, Andriy Yermak. Today, NABU and SAP are indeed carrying out procedural actions. At my home, there are no obstacles for the investigators. They were given full access to the apartment. My lawyers are present at the scene and are cooperating with law enforcement. On my part, there is full cooperation. As a result of the searches, no charges have been filed. However, on Thursday evening, Yermak submitted his resignation. Meanwhile, the Kremlin received a modified peace plan from the US and Ukraine, which had been altered during negotiations in Geneva. The US handed over to Russia the parameters of the plan agreed with Kyiv in Geneva. Discussion of the document is scheduled for next week.
It is already absolutely clear to everyone, especially after the leak of those tapes, the promises of Dmitriev, Luzhakov, and Vitkov regarding the so-called US plan, the peace plan, all show that this was a special operation by the Kremlin.
After the previous 28-point US plan leaked to the press, causing a serious stir and a wave of criticism, the White House classified the latest version of the peace plan. And now, even European diplomats do not know what is in the document. This is an unprecedented situation from a diplomatic point of view. None of us have this information. At the same time, Putin's Trojan horse in Europe arrived in Moscow for a visit. Viktor Orban. At a meeting with the Prime Minister of Hungary, Putin tried to revive the idea of negotiations with Trump in Budapest.
That was Donald's proposal. So what happened? Well, you see, he immediately said that we have good relations with Hungary, you have good relations, and so do I. So I suggest this option. Of course, we would be happy to, in due time. And in the course of our negotiations, if the Budapest platform is worked out, I would also be very
glad about that. Orban's recent and highly significant visit, for example, to Hungary, is precisely and strategically about Moscow setting up the next dangerous and intricate trap. And all of this complex situation is happening in parallel with what they are currently considering and meticulously planning. The US peace plan, already revised in Geneva. No, we need to clearly understand that this
Moscow's goal is to deceive Trump. Lies, manipulation, distortion of concepts, and simulated activity. Putin and his gang are doing everything possible not to take real steps toward ending the war, but at the same time not to spoil relations with Washington.
And of course, without the direct involvement of Kyiv, the Ukrainian capital, and without the explicit agreement of Brussels, the administrative center of the European Union, as a significant and highly anticipated potential meeting place for the prominent leaders, Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. And of course, Putin will certainly and strategically push Trump toward a kind of second Alaska, a metaphorical concession. Because, as they consistently and repeatedly put it, these important 28 points were carefully made with the enduring spirit of anchorage in mind. This very spirit of anchorage Now the Russians will try to implement it in a potential meeting.
The best evidence of the absolutely non-peaceful intentions of the aggressor is the battlefield, where the occupiers are only increasing the activity and intensity of their assault operations, continuing their offensive in the Donbas and Zaporizhzhia directions.
Russians found themselves in frontline encirclement near Huliaipol. Ukrainian armed forces executed their operation with precision. The Russian military is noticeably faltering. There has also been a series of failures for them in the Pokrovsk direction. A tough sweep, no ifs or buts. This is our response to their lies. Kupiansk crushed the enemy forces, leaving Russian generals in a stupor. Ukrainian drones are finishing off the occupiers in Crimea. Has the great liberation of Ukrainian territories really begun? More on this in the following report.
The Ukrainian armed forces have regained control of the situation in Huliaipol. More than 20 attempts have been repelled in the area of the settlement to storm our positions. And there was no new breakthrough, according to reports.
Of the defense forces of southern Ukraine. Of the defense forces of southern Ukraine.
As it became known, after the Russian advance in this direction, the command decided to redeploy part of the reserves to Huliaipol. At the same time, Russia was quick to claim that their troops had entered the district center itself. However, this information is refuted by our Center for Countering Disinformation. The fake news from the Russian propaganda channels about the occupation of the village of Vysoke has also not been confirmed.
They barely even approached our heavily fortified defensive area and critical logistics center, which was a significant strategic point. They are trying to send groups, detachments to the outskirts. Fierce and intense fighting is currently ongoing near Huliaipol once again. There, for our brave and dedicated defenders, so to speak, the situation remains critical. Some reinforcements have arrived, and there is an ongoing struggle to stabilize the situation in this direction.
At the same time, analysts say that Pokrovsk remains the main focus of the enemy's efforts. Attacks are taking place around the clock both in the city itself and on its outskirts as the enemy tries to encircle Ukrainian forces.
The enemy currently controls most of the strategic city of Pokrovsk, in particular the southern and central areas. They are trying to do just that and also constantly attempting to encircle it, tightening the ring near Mirnorad.
However, in their endless assaults on the Pokrovsk direction, the Russians are suffering colossal losses. Our command does not hide this. The main task of the armed forces of Ukraine today is to inflict maximum losses on the enemy grouping. And the defense forces are coping with this excellently.
The losses are so great that they have to use reserves that, in theory, were not intended to enter Pokrovsk. And even with operational reserves, Russia cannot take Pokrovsk. Right now, on average, more than 200 bodies are being laid per square kilometer of the enemy. That is, there are dead and wounded there. And that is an enormous number.
At the same time, besides defending, our soldiers in Pokrovsk also manage to advance at times. In particular, as reported from the area, there are periodic sweeps of the enemy on the other side of the railway, which currently serves as a kind of dividing line in the city.
The defense forces are indeed succeeding. And there are also counterattacks being carried out, including in Pokrovsk. We're talking about Kupiansk. We're basically talking about all our locations where the Russians are trying to advance.
Speaking of Kupiansk, according to Putin himself, the city is surrounded and under Russian control. In reality, there is no encirclement, not even close. And with each passing day, there are fewer and fewer Russians left in the settlement.
Unfortunately, the enemy is still present in Kupiansk for now. Thank you. The defense forces will be able to improve their tactical positions. Today, I'm not saying that we will be able to completely drive out the enemy, although the trend that is now emerging in Kupiansk shows that the defense forces are managing to clear our Ukrainian land of the enemy meter by meter.
And good news came yesterday from the occupied territories. In particular, details have emerged about the strike on Crimea. Thus, the General Staff reported that on the peninsula, the Panzer S-1 and Tor-2M air defense systems were attacked. After that, drones managed to destroy a warehouse of Orion and forepost drones, as well as strike a command post and a concentration of enemy personnel.
Local Z channels were in a panic, claiming that all sorts of devices were flying, even Mavics. And Mavics have a range of 10 kilometers. Where and who was launching them from? Obviously, it wasn't the Ukrainian military. So then who and from where? These are the same maritime drones whose involvement once again was confirmed by Z channels, which were clearly serving a function. Mini aircraft carriers delivering Mavics, Mavics fly in and destroy the target. The Mavic is the perfect tool if you can manage to get them there. If you can deliver them to the shore, after that these tools are practically impossible to destroy.
So essentially, the defense forces used a new tactic where one large drone delivers many small ones to the attack site. A lot of small ones. And given that everything went successfully, it seems that the Russians will soon have a lot more problems in their rear.
An urgent collapse of the Kremlin's oil schemes. Sanctions and old tankers have done their job. The ships that Russia used to circumvent restrictions and export oil are now heading straight for disposal. The Russian regime is losing its last opportunities for smuggling, and the oil transport empire is beginning to collapse from within. It seems that this time, Putin won't be able to avoid a blow to his financial flows. The details of this oil disaster for the Kremlin are coming up next in the report.
Putin is currently losing billions.
The ominous shadows slowly emerge from the darkness of the night.
Fleet of the Russian Federation has entered a phase of mass decommissioning. Aging tankers are being forced to sell at a discount and for less money. More and more old Russian tankers are reaching the end of their service life and need to be scrapped. As a result, floating scrap metal turns into real scrap, undermining the capabilities of the Shadow Fleet, forcing ships under sanctions to be sold at a discount and to look for ways to compensate for the losses.
The American side is strictly monitoring the moment of sale to the end consumers of Russian oil and liquefied gas. In addition, the American side has stated that in the event of Russia ambiguously leaving the negotiating table, secondary sanctions will be imposed against the end consumers of Russian energy resources themselves. This is a more serious blow to the Russian economy.
The average age of the Shadow Fleet's vessels is 20 years, with 60% of the ships being that age or older.
At the moment, the Russian side is forced to admit that the expenditure side of the Russian budget has increased by almost 3.5% of GDP. And this is evidence that there is practically no money left in the treasury of the Russian Federation, and accordingly, the ability to replenish funds through the operations of the Shadow Fleet has been reduced to a minimum.
This month, dismantling began in a Turkish port of the tanker Eagle S, which became known after an emergency incident in the Gulf of Finland. A year ago, the vessel damaged several underwater cables with its anchor, and Finnish authorities discovered suspicious equipment on board.
The Russian Federation has to sell oil at a 40% discount. In other words, this clearly shows that even end consumers fully understand the significant risks involved in the distinct possibility of severe sanctions from their American partners and allies. And the subsequent actions of the Russian Federation, specifically their decision to lower the price of crude oil, clearly indicate that they are undeniably forced to drastically dump prices onto the market just to maintain at least some sales volume. Russian energy resources are still needed.
Many ships in the Shadow Fleet have already exceeded their service life. Therefore, even these rusty tubs won't last long before they have to be decommissioned. In 2024, 409 ships were officially scrapped.
The number of decommissioned vessels will continue to grow. This pressure is also being exerted on other countries that are considering it, registering their ships under the Russian flag. It should also be noted that EU countries have imposed additional sanctions against, accordingly, the Shadow Fleet of the Russian Federation, minimizing the possibility of using this loophole to replenish the Russian budget.
Russian tax revenues from oil sales are at their lowest since the start of the war. Sanctions are hitting Russia hard, and there will be even more of them.
Losses from US sanctions at the moment are approaching, according to estimates, about $100 billion. In other words, this is a much more serious blow to the capabilities of the Russian economy and, accordingly, the Russian government to continue actively financing military operations in Ukraine.
In October, New Zealand additionally imposed sanctions against 65 vessels. And recently, Canada also expanded its own restrictions. Another 100 ships from Russia's Shadow Fleet were added to the list. The most likely breakthrough is on the technology front. Ukraine, together with Britain, is bringing a new weapon into the skies, one the Russians were afraid to even imagine. A brand new anti-drone monster tears Iranian devices apart right in midair, leaving the occupiers no chance at all. A new era of drone warfare is beginning on the front lines, and its first strike is already causing panic within Russian positions. All the details about this are coming up in the report.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
Ukraine is strengthening its air defense not only on the front lines but also on a global scale. The United Kingdom and Ukraine have signed a historic licensing agreement for the production of Ukrainian Octopus interceptor drones, which were specifically designed to combat Russian Shaheds. Defense Minister Denis Shmyhal emphasizes that this opens a new era of international military technical cooperation when Ukrainian technologies become the foundation for mass production by partners in the defense coalition.
Mass production of interceptors is planned, which could reach several thousand per month. The manufactured equipment will be delivered to Ukraine to strengthen the protection of our skies. Denis Shmyhal, Minister of Defense of Ukraine.
The Octopus project is currently in the final stage of negotiations and could be launched in the coming months. UK Minister for Defence Procurement Luke Pollard clarifies that the country is preparing to produce about 2,000 interceptors per month and send them directly to Ukraine.
The United Kingdom is an outstanding leader in research, development and advanced manufacturing. That's why we can contribute what our Ukrainian friends currently lack in this regard. We need to be fast and we need to be first. We are starting with drones for obvious reasons. But overall, Ukraine is an important partner for us in developing the technologies needed to deter Russia and rearm Europe. Luke Pollard, UK Minister for Defense Capability and Industry.
For Ukraine, this agreement is not simple. Expanding drone production. This is an attempt to create a stable system to counter the mass Shahed attacks that the aggressor country launches against Ukrainian cities almost every night. The Octopus has already proven its effectiveness on the battlefield. It's compact, maneuverable, and inexpensive to produce. It intercepts enemy drones in the air, providing a more flexible and faster defense than traditional air defense systems. In Ukraine, 3 manufacturers have already received the necessary technology to produce the Octopus. Another 11 are preparing their production lines. But the key factor is the international scale. Launching production in the United Kingdom makes it possible to move from dozens and hundreds of drones to 1,000 per month. Such a pace could for the first time shift the balance in the drone war, where until now Russia has held the numerical advantage. At the same time, Ukraine is developing joint programs with the United States, where production is also being set up for interceptors capable of destroying Russian strike drones. In Washington, they do not specify whether it is specifically about the Octopus, but the trend is clear. Partners are moving to a model not only of supplying, but also...
This involves a collaborative effort where multiple parties work together, combining their resources, expertise, and creative energies to achieve a shared outcome. It's a process of mutual contribution and integrated participation, leading to the collective creation of a final product or result. Projects of this kind, such as joint production of new buses in England and also in Ukraine, are even more significantly important for the Ukrainian side. They will not bring a significant turning point in the ongoing war in the immediate near future, but at the very same time, they will certainly be able to greatly improve the overall security of the skies for many, many cities and their inhabitants.
At the same time, Ukraine is strengthening not only its defense but also its financial front. Kiev and the International Monetary Fund have reached an agreement on a new 4-year support program worth $8.2 billion. Prime Minister Yulia Sviridenko emphasizes that these funds will help finance critically important expenses and maintain macro-financial stability, without which neither the production of weapons nor the resilience of the defense economy is possible. At this very moment, Turkey is making a breakthrough that changes the rules of the game. Ankara is distancing itself from Moscow. Moreover, it has now decided to apply more pressure. Erdogan is mobilizing NATO's most powerful army. It is preparing to enter Ukraine and decisively crush Putin's soldiers. In the Kremlin, everyone is being put on high alert. The Russian dictator is losing allies and, it seems, cannot recover from Turkey's betrayal. So, what exactly is Ankara's plan? All the details are coming up in just a few seconds. Recep Erdogan has once again stabbed Putin in the back. The president of Turkey did this right after his latest meeting with Volodymyr Zelensky. At that time, both leaders, behind closed doors, according to the press, discussed a number of very important issues regarding a ceasefire in Ukraine and further security guarantees for official Kyiv.
President Erdogan and his Ukrainian counterpart Volodymyr Zelensky stated that the talks were constructive and positive, although no real details about the negotiations themselves were given.
This sparked an even greater wave of rumors in political circles. While some reliable sources allegedly claimed that Erdogan was trying to persuade Zelensky to accept capitulation and agree to the Kremlin's proposal, others, on the contrary, insisted that the Turkish president was discouraging the Ukrainians from Putin's peace plan and urging them to ramp up military production.
They also discussed the growing defense cooperation, stating that the results of this collaboration will be seen in the future.
And here is the result. The Turkish Ministry of Defense has officially announced its readiness to deploy troops in Ukraine. The troops are reportedly on high alert, and Ankara is ready to send a contingent as soon as tomorrow.
Wherever there is a need for peace, security, and stability, the Turkish armed forces are the first to come to mind. This is a vivid testament to the capabilities, effectiveness, deterrent potential, and authority of the Turkish Air Force.
It seems Erdogan has made his choice. He deserves credit for that. All these years, he has skillfully managed to sit on two chairs at once. He managed to help Ukraine while at the same time buying energy resources and weapons from Moscow, all the while being a NATO member. In
the first few years of this conflict, Erdogan stated that he was essentially the only person who had good relations both with Moscow and with Ukraine, while also being a NATO member and maintaining close ties with Washington.
As for what comes next, it's more complicated and much less clear. Erdogan's desire to continue his friendship with the bloody Russian dictator. After the latest sanctions imposed on Russia, buying oil and gas, Ankara is no longer able to purchase them in former volumes at reduced prices. And that means Turkey has no need to coddle Putin and Russia anymore.
It's worth noting that over the past few months, Turkey's relations with Moscow seem to have cooled off a bit. Although Erdogan still communicates with Putin, it's not as often as before. There have been fewer face-to-face meetings, and one of the factors contributing to this is that, with Trump's election as president, Turkey has significantly improved its relations with Washington. And especially Erdogan's personal ties with Trump have become very close. And
for the Kremlin, the friendship between Trump and Erdogan threatens to be a disaster. Without the blessing of the Turkish president, Russia could lose a huge portion of its grey imports and dual-use goods, which are actively brought into the Russian Federation, including through Turkey.
And the destruction of economic ties with Russia is happening across all directions. Turkey has been a major partner of the Russian Federation for a long time, and not only in the energy sector, but also in a tremendous amount of economic cooperation overall. But Turkey will also be destroyed.
As for assistance to Ukraine, it seems that Ankara is giving its companies the green light here. After the loud statement by Turkey's Ministry of Defense about sending its contingent to our country, a number of Turkish companies simultaneously announced the establishment of joint military production. So it's quite possible that very soon Russian oil refineries deep in the enemy's rear will be hit not only by Ukrainian, but also by missiles that until recently were from countries friendly to the Kremlin. Turkish missiles and drones.
The inevitable has happened. Europe is moving to the front line. Russia is increasing pressure on NATO, and the West's response is finally becoming deadly for Putin. Germany has already prepared a secret action plan. The Allies have decided to press on the Kremlin's sore spot. This is retribution for all of Moscow's crimes. Will Europe really do what it has long been talking about? And will the dictator stop halfway to his goal? Don't miss the sensational details in the report coming up in just a moment.
Europe is preparing to respond to Russia's attacks. MEPs propose to defend together, learn from Ukraine, and strengthen sanctions against Russia and Belarus, according to DW.
Russia needs to be spoken to in its own language. Russia understands only the language of force. That's why Russia has an excellent relationship with Turkey, despite the fact that Turkey shot down its plane. And at the same time, it didn't say that it was a mistake. They apologized for what they did, but at the same time made it clear, we put you in your place.
A day later, the publication Politico also wrote that Europe is considering retaliatory actions against Russia.
To talk about anything more serious, as of now, I think, unfortunately, it's still too early to speak about a real European response, even though it's obvious that Russian aggression against Europe has been going on for a long time. Either Russian drones are flying in, or the drones that enter Europe are mostly launched by people connected to the Russian Federation. Europe is still not psychologically ready to accept that, let's say, such measures will be used. Military pressure mechanisms.
According to journalist sources, the ideas for retaliation against Russia range from joint offensive cyber operations to rapid and coordinated identification. Sources of hybrid attacks to unexpected military exercises led by NATO. The most concrete plan, judging by the Wall Street Journal's description, is Germany's plan. The country has developed a secret plan to prepare for a possible war with Russia
In Germany in 2022, they also thought maybe we should sacrifice Ukraine and that's it, but in 2023, sometime closer to the end of the year, the German Council on Foreign Relations prepared a report which included a phrase stating that if Ukraine is defeated, a war between Germany and Russia is a prospect, 6 to 10 years. That is to say, it's not that the impending war is entirely cancelled, the potential conflict might indeed be temporarily postponed, but over a significantly longer period of time, it will, in all likelihood, still inevitably happen. Eventually, in Germany, they said no, it won't happen. 6 to 10 years, the war could start in as little as a year.
In just over 2 years, the Germans have created a document that provides for sending forces eastward to a hypothetical front line. Up to 800,000 servicemen from NATO countries, including units from Germany and the United States. Sources at the Wall Street Journal claim that the plan details the logistical routes along which the troops are to be redeployed.
Of course, it's preferable to do this on the territory of Ukraine. It's more pleasant than allowing it on your own territory. But what does it mean to do this on the territory of Ukraine? This means that Germany would send its troops to Ukraine to fight against Russia. So far, we haven't seen any serious signals from our European partners about their readiness to send troops to Ukraine. But there is talk, especially from Emmanuel Macron. He keeps bringing it up, but somehow this idea isn't really catching on. Approval from partners in the European Union.
By continuing its aggression, Russia must understand that in Ukraine it may face not only the armed forces of Ukraine, but also other military forces defending the sovereignty of their countries.
That's all from me for now. This was me, Darina Hatsakalo. Even more scorching news in our next episode. And in the meantime, don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. See you.